In the last 2 years, the West has hit Russia with an unprecedented package of sanctions. It hoped that this would make it difficult for Russia to fund its war against Ukraine. But you see, Moscow stands largely unaffected because it has found its way around these very sanctions. Russian companies are still importing weapon parts, tech and equipment. The question is, how so? All thanks to cryptocurrency. That's right, cryptocurrency has been fueling the Ukraine war. Cryptocurrency is secretive, it's untraceable, and it's everything that Russian firms had been seeking for secret trading. In fact, in late 2022, Russia's largest maker of small arms, Kalashnikov concern, needed electrical parts for drones. It had listed 248 types of electronic parts. Who would supply them, you ask? A Hong Kong electronics distributor, Kynix Semiconductor, KYNIX. But Kalashnikov concern could not approach that company. The US was cutting such deals off, and even Chinese banks had grown wary of the sanctions and started blocking payments from Russia. There were fears in China that its lenders be targeted by the West if they are too accommodative of sanctioned Russian businesses. And so instead of trading with the Hong Kong electronics distributor directly, the Russian arms maker approached a middleman. His name is Andrei Zverev. He is a self-described Russian smuggler based in China. He had the perfect solution for the Russian company's problems. Zverev used the cryptocurrency called Tether to relay millions of dollars from Kalashnikov to its supplier. I will tell you how this entire scheme played out, but before that, let me just tell you a bit about Tether, which is a stable coin. It is pegged to the US dollar, meaning its value fluctuates with the dollar. It is privately held by Tether Holdings. The issuer is registered in the British Virgin Islands. It is owned by a small group of individuals. Tether Holdings distributes it to customers in exchange for dollars. Customers can then trade it on virtual public ledgers known as blockchains, or via private exchanges. They can use it to purchase other cryptocurrencies or to pay for goods and services, just like Russian companies. In fact, it is the most traded cryptocurrency. As many as $120 billion worth of these stable coins change hands each day. It is often traded about twice as much as Bitcoin. In fact, in 2023, Tether transactions totaled over $10 trillion. Now, like I said, the stablecoin works much like dollar, but unlike government-issued currency inside the banking system, authorities have limited ability to trace its use around the world. And because of this, Tether has emerged as one of the world's default black market payment methods. And Russian firms, by the way, are making the most of it in order to avoid sanctions. The middlemen take payments from the importers in rubles in their Russian bank accounts. They convert it into the cryptocurrency and then pay out the foreign suppliers in their local currency. Zverev, he took Kalashnikov concern's order to Kynix. It was priced at about 70 million yuan, that is just under $10 million. You see, Zverev is notorious for such trade schemes. In fact, when Russia invaded Ukraine, Zverev wrote on a personal blog that readers should protect their savings from the plummeting ruble by buying Tether on Garetti. And for those who are not aware, Garetti is a Moscow-based crypto exchange. It basically works almost exclusively with Russian clients. Zverev's reasoning was that the Western regulators would not be able to shut it down. Only 2 months later, the US blacklisted Garetti for being a haven for cyber criminals. But as Zverev claimed, its business continued to thrive. Meanwhile, Tether has been increasingly showing up in investigations tied to money laundering, terror financing, and sanctions evasion. And it's not just the Ukraine war. The cryptocurrency has been used in financing Hamas, paying Chinese fentanyl suppliers, funding the North Korean nuclear program, and helping sanctioned Russian oligarchs buy sanctioned Venezuelan oil. You see, it has become the go-to currency for all illicit trades. It is funding war and terrorism. And despite all this, we continue to lack regulations as far as crypto trading is concerned. When will it be scrutinized, is the question. Is China trying to provoke a verbal conflict with India in the middle of the election? How else will you explain what's going on? This weekend, while most of you were perhaps de-stressing, preparing for the week ahead, China was preparing for a verbal conflict with India. It was firing rhetorical bombs. On Saturday, China, quote-unquote, renamed 30 places in Arunachal Pradesh. I say quote-unquote because Arunachal or parts of Arunachal are not China's to rename. Arunachal Pradesh is an integral part of India, just like it always has been. But you see, this fact does not sit well with China. Beijing believes in and desperately tries to impose its alternate reality, one where Arunachal Pradesh is supposedly a part of Tibet and by extension a part of China. In fact, Beijing calls Arunachal Pradesh Zhangnan. On Saturday, China's Ministry of Civil Affairs published a list of what it calls standardized names, and on it were the names of 11 areas of Arunachal Pradesh, 12 mountains, 4 rivers, 1 lake, a mountain pass, and a piece of land, we are being told. Which are these places and mountains? We don't know. A Hong Kong-based media house that had access to the list reports that the names were given in Chinese characters, Tibetan and Pinyin, the Roman alphabet version of Mandarin Chinese. Let me just read out for you what this report quotes the Chinese ministry as saying. In accordance with the relevant provisions of the State Council on the Management of Geographical Names, we, in conjunction with the relevant departments, have standardized some of the geographical names in Zhangnan of China. Unquote. This is not a first, not even a second. China is a habitual offender cum provocateur. Beijing has published at least 3 such lists in the last 7 years. The first one was published in 2017. It had 6 names. In 2021, another list was published. This one had the names of 15 places. The third list was published in 2023, and this one had names of 11 places. China wrongly and absurdly claims that naming Chinese places in foreign languages harms China's territorial claims and sovereignty rights. What about places that are not Chinese? What is this overdrive to claim to rename foreign territories? There is a word for it, and it's called aggression. What China is basically trying to do is abuse the undefined border. India and China share a 3,200-kilometer line of actual control. The line is undefined. In March, when the Indian Prime Minister visited Arunachal Pradesh, China decided to start ranting. Prime Minister Modi spent a day in Arunachal Pradesh. The visit was extremely significant because the Prime Minister inaugurated the Sela Tunnel. It is the world's longest twin-lane tunnel, and it is constructed at the elevation of 13,000 feet. The project was built at the cost of 825 crore rupees. This tunnel provides an all-weather connectivity to Tawang, which borders China. It also cuts down the travel time, which means this tunnel enables faster deployment of weapons, soldiers, and military equipment to the border. China is struggling to digest this boost to India's defense preparedness. So Beijing is acting out. And right after the Prime Minister's visit, China said, and I'm quoting, "Zhangnan area is Chinese territory," quote unquote. The Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson, Wang Wenbin, added, and I'm quoting again, "India has no right to arbitrarily develop the area of Zhangnan in China. India's relevant moves will only complicate the boundary question and disrupt the situation in the border areas between the two countries," quote unquote. Look at what China said last week. Zhangnan in the eastern sector has always been China's territory. quote unquote, adding China had all along exercised effective administrative jurisdiction over the area, quote unquote, until India's illegal occupation, quote unquote. Whom exactly is China trying to manipulate with these lies is the question. In 1 month, China has spoken about Arunachal Pradesh 5 times. The question is, what exactly is China trying to do, except provoke India through its absurd and bizarre claims? China clearly is threatened by India's border infrastructure, but how does it help to start a verbal conflict in the middle of the Indian general election? How does China benefit from it? Except, it gets to keep the Indian authorities engaged, perhaps even disturbed. Remarks made by the US ambassador to India, Eric Garcetti, have been dominating headlines. The comments were made during an interview to news agency ANI. What did he say? Let's get you all the details. Now, as part of a wide-ranging interview, the ambassador spoke about his journey, the US-India relationship, also his commitment towards boosting those ties, among other aspects. Referring to the investigation of the alleged failed assassination plot against Khalistani terrorist Gurpatwant Singh Pannu, the ambassador said that no government or its employee can be involved in the alleged assassination of another country's citizen, which is just an unacceptable red line, quote unquote.
Any country having an active member of their government involved in a second country trying to assassinate one of their citizens. That's, I think, usually a red line for any country. That's a basic issue of sovereignty. That's a basic issue of rights.
Now, in case you weren't aware already, India has designated Gurpatwant Singh Pannu as a terrorist. He enjoys dual citizenship in America and Canada. India and the US are working together in the investigation of the alleged foiled assassination plot against the Khalistani terrorist. Pannu has repeatedly issued threats against India, in fact. Basically, he has openly issued multiple threats to India related to attacks on the Indian Parliament, Air India. So what about these threats? What did the ambassador have to say about them? Referring to the threats issued by Gurpatwant Singh Pannu, Eric Garcetti said that the American system protects free speech, quote unquote, for better or for worse. He also made it clear that an American citizen can be convicted or deported only according to the country's laws.
Our law for an American citizen to be convicted in an American court or to be deported to have a criminal case in another country, it has to meet our law. And so we'll continue working, and if anybody ever says something that steps over that line, and I know it's gotten very close, we will be working together on that.
Now, the thing is, Pannu's threats have caused a lot of concern, not just in India, but also among the members of the Indian-American community. Just for context, you remember how we told you recently that some members of the Indian-American community held a special meeting in America? They met with representatives from the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the Department of Justice, and the police. Members of the Indian-American community told the US authorities that American soil is being used for terror activities against India. They also spoke about the rise of the Khalistani movement in the US, which of course has been a major concern. Now, following the remarks made by the US ambassador to India in the latest, reacting to the remarks made by the ambassador regarding the quote-unquote red line, India's External Affairs Minister, Dr. S. Jaishankar, has said that the US ambassador, as an ambassador, will say what he thinks is the position of his government.
The US ambassador, as an ambassador, obviously will say what he thinks is the thinking of his government or the position of his government. I will say what is the position of my government. And the position of my government is that in this particular case, there have been certain information which has been provided to us, which we are investigating. And it is something we are investigating because we believe our own national security interests are involved in that investigation. So as and when we have something to say on that investigation, we would be very glad to speak about it.
So there you have it. India has made its position absolutely clear, and we will be keeping a close eye on how things pan out.